In 1996, this woman came forward to tell the Belgian authorities she'd spent her childhood years as the victim of a paedophile network. She described a world of organised sexual abuse, torture and even murder.
It was terrible. You didn't believe your eyes. And I didn't believe that humans could do that.
She talked of violent child sex orgies with politicians, judges and influential businessmen, a Belgian underworld in which the establishment has refused to believe.
Regina Louf is a pathological liar. She's a woman who's invented a series of scenarios which just don't stand up.
A campaign followed to discredit her evidence, but now in an exclusive interview, the policeman assigned to investigate her claims has broken his silence. He says the inquiry was blocked because it threatened to reveal too much.
I'm convinced that she has been a victim, that's for sure.
In August 1995, 17-year-old Anne Marchal and her 19-year-old friend Yefye Lambrex go on a camping holiday with a group of friends. During their holiday, Anne and Yefye attend a hypnotist show. Whilst on stage, they're filmed by a member of the audience. Later that night, Anne's father receives a disturbing call.
We received a phone call from one of the friends who told us that Anne and Yefye had not returned from a show they had attended in Blankenberg the previous evening.
When Paul Marchal meets the police himself the following day, he's worried by their apparent lack of concern.
So I asked, so what are you going to do? Just don't worry, the girls will be back, they probably just went looking for adventure. They will most definitely show up. I was shocked. I had always thought that the police are there to make sure everything works out fine, everything works out safely.
Paul Marchal returns home and begins his own campaign to find his daughter. He is not the only parent searching for a missing child that summer in Belgium. Only 8 weeks before Anne and Yefye disappeared, 8-year-olds Melissa Rousseau and Julie Lejeune had vanished from a park near their home in Grasse-Alogne. Journalist Douglas de Koning has written about the impact of Belgium's missing children throughout the 90s.
It happened so often that kids disappeared. It seemed like some kind of phenomenon we started to live with. Yeah, that happens every summer. Some kids disappear.
Some politicians like Vincent Descroly are also becoming concerned.
A child disappearance was considered a relatively ordinary problem. The dominant view within the Belgian police was to simply wait for 48 hours.
Studies show that 91% of abducted children are murdered within 24 hours. 6 months pass and the girls are not found. On a summer's day in 1996, 12-year-old Sabine Dardenne begins her ride to school as usual.
Et j'y vais. Pousse pas! Vite, vite!
When Sabine goes missing, it becomes Belgium's latest high-profile case that year of a young girl disappearing. And Sabine's disappearance fades out of the headlines. Another young girl is targeted. 14-year-old Laetitia Delay is walking home from her local swimming pool in Bertry, southern Belgium. She is snatched off the street in broad daylight. With 6 girls missing, there is strong public pressure to get results. One statement came from a local resident who has noticed a suspicious vehicle in the village.
We were able to work out some parts of the registration number of the van, a white van.
Which allowed us to make a connection with someone who had a potential profile on this kind of thing.
The van is registered to a 39-year-old father of 3, an unemployed electrician called Marc Dutroux. Dumoulin brings Dutroux in for questioning, along with his wife, Michel Martin, and known associate, Michel Lelièvre.
Non. Vous êtes-vous déjà rendu à Bertry? Je sais pas.
With Dutroux not talking, Dumoulin and his team turn to the other 2 in custody. Michel Lelièvre, a drifter and heroin addict who has been assisting Marc Dutroux, caves in under questioning. Dutroux's wife, Michel Martin, also confesses, and attempts to distance herself from her husband. Armed with sensational information of the whereabouts of the two missing girls, investigators rush Dutroux to a house in Charleroi, in which he claims they're imprisoned. In a tiny, filthy dungeon hidden underneath the house, Dumoulin finds Laetitia Delay abducted 6 days earlier. And, incredibly, Sabine Dardenne, still alive 80 days after disappearing.
In June 1996, this Belgian slum revealed a bitter secret that would come to haunt the nation. The eyes of the world watched in horror. Into the light emerged two young girls. Laetitia, aged 14, and Sabine, just 12, were the latest in a long line of girls who'd gone missing. Marc Dutroux, a convicted rapist and kidnapper, had led the police to where he'd imprisoned them. Relief swept Belgium as their tearful homecoming was caught on camera. But what of Belgium's other missing children? 8-year-olds Julia and Melissa, who were missing for more than a year, and 12 others who'd vanished mysteriously. Was this a new lead in the hunt for them? The hopes of their parents were soon dashed. Within days, Marc Dutroux led police to the site where the bodies of Julie Lejeune and Melissa Rousseau were buried.
They starved to death when he had been in prison for car theft.
Officially, Dutroux lived on benefits, yet this house, now derelict, was one of 5 that he owned. The bodies of 2 more missing girls were found at another, Effie Lambrex and Anne Marchal.
Over the next few months, a series of devastating revelations emerge about Dutroux's past and his relationship to the country's authorities. Belgians realize in horror that the police could have arrested him long ago, potentially saving the lives of 4 young girls.
The name of Marc Dutroux was in the file less than 2 weeks after the disappearance of Julie and Melissa. So the police had all the information they could only dream of.
Information comes to light. In 1989, 6 years before the disappearance of Julie Lejeune and Melissa Rousseau, Dutroux and his wife had been convicted of the abduction and rape of 5 girls. Dutroux was released just 3 years into a 13-year sentence.
It was completely predictable that this guy would relapse. A time bomb. A powerful time bomb was ticking.
From his release in 1992, warning signs were flashing. A police informant claimed he was asked by Dutroux to help him kidnap a girl. Dutroux's own mother even tipped off police that her son may be hiding girls in his home. Eventually, in August 1995, the police put him under surveillance, an operation codenamed Othello. A camera was hidden in a railway wagon in front of his house in Marcinelle.
This camera was in front of the house the night that Anne and Effie were kidnapped. The problem was that Dutroux chose to do this kidnapping at night, and the police turned off the camera at 6 o'clock in the evening. Afterwards, they tell us that for operational reasons, this camera has only been turning from 8 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock in the evening or something. This is very intelligent if you want to catch someone, a pedophile, kidnapping girls.
The officer in charge of Operation Othello, René Michaud, visited the house in December 1995. Dutroux had recently been questioned about stolen cars, and investigators used this as an opportune moment to search his house. Also present was a locksmith, Alain Lejeune, who was accompanying the police in their search.
Qu'est-ce qu'on entend? Il y a des enfants ici?
Suddenly, children's voices are heard.
You heard these voices and this discussion starts. Did you hear that?
Non, ce sont des enfants dehors. Ouais, ils jouent dehors.
Ah non, ce bruit vient de l'intérieur. Écoutez, c'est clair.
Silence. Et puis c'est qui le policier ici? Allez, on y va.
Locksmith said, I heard voices and it was absolutely clear that they came from there, from 2 meters from where we were standing.
The voices are Melissa Rousseau and Julie Lejeune. 3 months later, they were dead.
Do not forget that this Julie and Melissa disappearance was the top story in Belgium. That was the top priority of police. At least that's what they told us.
Michaud found video cassettes during his search.
They didn't watch the tapes. The explanation afterwards that they didn't have a video player. On one of these tapes, we can see Marc Dutroux constructing his cage. The explanation of where it was and how it was constructed was on tape. They just had to watch it, but they had no video player. There again, that's official version. Sorry, I don't buy it.
Toute la Belgique recherche les enfants.
The whole of Belgium was searching for the kids. And the gendarmerie knows Dutroux, with his past as a child abuser. They know he's building suspect hiding places in some of his houses. And yet, for some totally incomprehensible reason, Marc Dutroux wasn't arrested.
Belgians begin to ask whether Marc Dutroux is being protected by powerful people within the state. While in custody, Dutroux himself fans the flames of conspiracy with a controversial claim which will forever change the global perception of this case. He states he is part of a national paedophile network whose tentacles stretch right to the top of Belgian society. Investigating judge Jean-Marc Connerotte is put in charge of preparing the case against Dutroux. He is determined to get the truth. Connerotte arrests known associates of Dutroux. One of these is Michel Nihoul, a well-connected Brussels businessman and pub owner.
He's a part of this scene of sex parties in Brussels in the early 80s. He's the kind of guy telling stories about tapes that allow him to blackmail a minister, being involved in some kind of crime.
Connerotte knew Nihoul had influential friends. He suspected he was the brains behind a network supplying clients with children to abuse. It's a charge Nihoul denies. Connerotte appealed to the public for information.
When I saw him walking down the stairs, I thought that I knew everything about him. It was a shock. I thought, finally, they stopped him.
Regina Louf was one of the first to come forward. She said that as a child she'd been abused for many years in a paedophile network involving Nihoul and Dutroux.
I remember Jean-Michel Nihoul as a very cruel man. He abused children in a very sadistic way.
She says that at the age of 12 she was taken with other children to sex parties, and she told investigators Dutroux was there working for Nihoul.
Dutroux was a boy who brought drugs, cocaine and something like that to these parties, who brought some girls or watched girls on these parties.
Nihoul, she said, was one of those who organised the parties and invited the cream of Belgian society, judges, politicians and influential businessmen, in order to compromise them. Regina Louf's story was horrific, but her account of a violent paedophile underworld was by now reinforced by new witnesses, some of whom also named influential people. The investigation began. The witnesses' identities were protected. Each was given a code name beginning with X. Regina was X1. They went up to X9. Their testimonies became known as Belgium's X-Files.
The people who were going to these parties were big businessmen. There were also politicians.
If this story is true, Connerotte appears to have stumbled upon evidence that a paedophile network involving Dutroux, Nihoul and powerful people in Belgian society does indeed exist. It falls to Rudy Hoskins to investigate the claims of Regina Louf.
She talked about lots of people, a lot of notorious people in Belgium, could be politicians or people from corporates, stuff like that. Also people from the police.
That they are skeptical, I think it's logical. But the only thing I asked from them was to do their job and to look for clues.
Then Regina Louf provides extensive details of the unsolved murder of 15-year-old Christina van Hees, whose body was discovered in a disused farm on the outskirts of Brussels in 1984.
We found evidence in the old murder file about the autopsy of the corpse that corroborated her story. The way the victim was bound with the hands on the back and all kind of stuff they did to the victim. And there were really things she gave in her interview that were not publicly made available at that time of the murders that she told us.
Regina Louf's information on the Van Hees murder persuades Hoskins that maybe there is some truth in the rest of her testimony. However, Judge Connerot's investigation into Regina Louf's claim of the existence of a powerful paedophile network is suddenly brought to a halt. In October 1996, he is sacked. Rudy Hoskins and the team working with the ex-witnesses are summoned to the Justice Department.
We were just informed during that meeting that, already, as from today, you stop your investigation. And that was it. We were going too far for some people. Don't ask me who, I have no idea, and why, no idea. I still ask myself the same question, but we touched upon something that was not supposed to get out in the open.
Connerot's dismissal has a devastating effect on public confidence in the Dutroux investigation.
Jean-Marc Connerot, the man who'd arrested Dutroux, who'd saved the imprisoned girls, was sacked from the case. His removal caused a public outcry. Belgians lost faith in their judicial system. They descended on the Palace of Justice and accused the courts of colluding with the killers.
There's an investigating magistrate, Connerot, who arrests 10 people, and they sack him and they appoint another investigating magistrate, Langlois, who's never done the job before. It's his first appointment in the most important investigation, in the biggest file of the century. You're going to put in an investigating magistrate who's never done the job before? Can you understand that?
300,000 outraged Belgians marched through Brussels in a demonstration of grief and solidarity. This white march was the largest protest the country had ever seen. Belgians felt that the dismissal of Connerot was a betrayal of Dutroux's victims, that it signalled the end of any real search for a network. The two rescued girls were overwhelmed.
Merci à tous d'être venus si nombreux. Merci aussi à tout le monde d'être venu.
The country's highest legal authorities had removed the only judge in which the public had any faith because he'd attended a fundraising dinner for the families of missing children. A conflict of interest, they called it, a lack of judgment. The government feared a revolution.
I think there were a kind of insurrection climate, a kind of pre-revolutionary climate here. You know, the big powers in Belgium, so the magistrates and the political circles, the government, the parliament, everything was totally discredited. Everything was totally discredited.
No one knew what to believe anymore. Rumour and speculation spawned a variety of wild theories. To appease the public's concern, Parliament set up the Dutroux-Nichoul Commission. But what the Commission revealed was incompetence that beggared belief.
They had everything they needed to arrest Dutroux. That's the scandal of this affair. Dutroux was known. He had previous forms. They had valid intelligence that he'd built the hiding place in the cellar for the little girls. There was information from Charleroi that the children could be at the house.
But when the Parliamentary Commission began to ask why, was it incompetence or had someone in authority protected Dutroux, cooperation with their investigation stopped. But Jean-Michel Nichoul, the man suspected of hiring Dutroux to kidnap children, was released from jail after just 5 months. And some members of the Commission remain convinced he is protected.
There's no material evidence, no witness statements which state that it was Dutroux who really kidnapped the children, who really raped them, and who really killed them.
The parents suspect Dutroux was not acting alone, that others were involved in abducting and hiding the girls. When he was briefly imprisoned for car theft in November 1995, Dutroux claims to have left the girls in his cellar, in this specially constructed cage. On his release, after nearly 4 months, Dutroux claims he found the children barely alive. But for the Rousseaus, this story can't be true.
He says when he came out of prison 4 months later, they're still alive. Well, then they're superhuman. It's unimaginable, 2 children of 8 holding out. Alone, with nothing to sustain them. No food, no heat, no human, no psychological contact, nothing.
So how did they survive so long? Did someone else keep them alive? The Palace of Justice in Liège is the seat of one of Belgium's most powerful figures, Prosecutor General Anne Tilly, who's in charge of the case. She says there's no evidence to contradict Dutroux's version of how the children died. So how did the children survive so long, nearly 4 months, until Dutroux was released from prison?
Melissa was nearly dead, and then she died. I think it was the next day.
How could she have survived nearly 4 months?
Survive in what condition? In a lamentable state. She was so weak she could not get up. That's according to Dutroux, of course. No one else was there.
Dutroux was acting alone. This is the mantra repeated again and again in Belgium, with a certitude that for the victims' parents is inexplicable. They believe that investigators have blocked every lead, rejected every clue which would reveal that Dutroux was kidnapping girls for someone else. Most painful, perhaps, is the autopsy report which shows Melissa had been repeatedly raped about 2 weeks before her death, while Dutroux was in jail. So who raped this child? Dutroux denies he raped the girls. But isn't it simple to find out if Dutroux raped them, or someone else, scientifically?
Normally, yes. In principle, yes. But in fact, the most elementary scientific tests, like DNA tests, the traces of the culprit on the body of the child, were just not done.
Can you explain why there was no DNA analysis done?
They were in a very putrefied state. It did not allow us to make an analysis of that type, of sperm or anything.
The question remains unanswered. Why is there no DNA result? Might it have shown that someone else had raped Melissa? Other forensic tests that should have been routine were just not done. Human hairs collected from Dutroux's dungeon weren't sent for analysis. The logic was strange. They claimed that as there was no evidence anyone else had entered the cage, there was no need to analyse the hair. Jacques Langlois refused to be interviewed.
Also not appearing is Regina Louf, whose police interviews in 1996 appear to support the existence of a paedophile ring involving rich clients and run by Michel Nihoul. But the police investigation into Regina's claims was halted in 1997.
We still ask ourselves the same question, why? We were just doing our work, we were objective. Why the hell did they stop us?
She was interviewed by a second team of investigators and her testimony dismissed.
They said it right in my face that they didn't believe it anymore and that I was sick in the head and that I just only wanted attention.
By 2004, Regina Louf's character and testimony are bitterly disputed. Her motives and her state of mind are questioned, and she is dismissed in the press as a pathological liar.
When the media took it up, it was to destroy her.
X1 et ses fantasmes, une enquête au-delà du réel. Madame, Monsieur, bonsoir. L'affaire Dutroux s'est enrichie de...
The flagship programme of the government-funded French-language channel was unequivocal. De Batz was guilty, they declared, and Regina Louf a sinister and deranged liar.
I think Regina Louf is a pathological liar. She's a woman who's invented scenarios that don't stand up to scrutiny. It's all been shown to be fiction.
It's not that difficult to turn a victim in someone who is crazy. You just point your finger at the victim or the witness and say, she's false, she's just a maniac or something like that.
Well, no, not according to the investigators who were sacked. They don't agree with you. They say they weren't even allowed to investigate.
No, that's not accurate.
Some people say this, but they weren't there. We lived all the testimonies. We've seen them. We did the investigations. So for ourselves, we know what should have been right or what could have been wrong. But when you don't, when you haven't lived it, when you haven't seen everything, you can't give an opinion on this. It's impossible. But we found some things that should have been investigated more.
Despite its earlier investigating zeal, Belgium's parliament now stood by as Regina Louf's testimony was declared worthless. the judiciary announced it would not be used in any trial.
It has taken 8 years to bring Dutroux to trial. Officially, this is because the authorities have had to spend years investigating hundreds of leads into paedophile networks, which the police are convinced don't exist. Belgians are split over whether Dutroux is a lone predator or part of a paedophile ring run by his co-defendant, Michel Nihoul.
Ik denk inderdaad dat niet alleen Dutroux...
I do think it wasn't just Dutroux who killed my child.
Ik denk inderdaad dat de politie...
I think that the police and the judiciary share in the guilt.
But many voices who could potentially shed light on this story are not in court, fueling suspicions of a cover-up.
There are a lot of people who died in the entourage of Dutroux very quick after he was arrested.
Dutroux, meanwhile, has sat in jail, but outside, in the shadowy circles in which he moved, potential witnesses in the Dutroux affair have died in strange ways. A police informer with links to the Charleroi underworld, José Steppe, told a journalist he had explosive information on Dutroux. 2 days before they were due to meet, he died. His family believes he was poisoned. Jean-Paul Tamineau was up to his neck in the Charleroi underworld of stolen cars and prostitution. He was summoned to see the Charleroi police and disappeared. The day of Dutroux's arrest, his foot was fished out of the canal. Social worker Gina Pardens worked with abused children. She'd identified the paedophile members of a pornography ring who'd threatened her. When she reported the threats to the police, she was killed in an unexplained car crash. Francois Raiskens told a friend he'd seen one of the missing girls, Melissa, alive in Holland. Before he could tell the police, his body was found crushed on the railway line. Some 20 people, all potential witnesses in the Dutroux affair, have died in mysterious circumstances.
I survived my testimony just because I said it all. Why kill me now, I'm mad.
On the 17th of June 2004, Marc Dutroux is found guilty of the abduction and rape of 6 girls and killing 4 of them. He is sentenced to life behind bars. His associate and driver, Michel Lelièvre, is found guilty of kidnapping and sentenced to 25 years in jail. Dutroux's ex-wife, Michelle Martin, is found guilty of conspiracy to kidnap and sentenced to 30 years in jail. Businessman Michel Nihoul is convicted of drugs offences, but he is acquitted of being an accomplice of Dutroux. Officially, therefore, there is no paedophile network, no powerful clients, and no cover-up by the authorities.
The truth is that there is a network, and that they have to search for that network, so that you can save other children in the future.
Children continue to go missing in Belgium. Dutroux's arrest has made no difference. Last year it was more than 2,000.